Did you know that there is a piece of property here in Atlanta, Georgia that houses 70,000 residents and brings in over 100,000 tourists each year? The only problem is some of those residents don't know that they're dead. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell if you want to be notified for our future videos coming out. Welcome to Esoteric Atlanta. My name is Brice, and today we're talking about Oakland Cemetery. Now, as I've said before in other videos, I am a believer in the paranormal. I've had many experiences with the other side, and I think a lot of people who grow up in the Old South, especially in old plantation homes or in older cities, probably have had multiple experiences with ghosts. However, most of the time I feel like graveyards and cemeteries really aren't that creepy. I just don't think that a lot of times spirits, deceased people want to hang out in a cemetery. No, they're gonna go to their home or to a place they loved, or maybe go haunt someone still living that they despised. I don't know. But Oakland Cemetery is very different. I do believe that Oakland Cemetery is haunted. And I believe that Oakland Cemetery is haunted because Oakland Cemetery isn't like other cemeteries. Oakland Cemetery is a social hotspot, and it's been that way since its beginning. So around 1850, some city officials in Atlanta decided that they needed to have a public burial ground. And so they decided to look a little bit outside of the city, in the country, to buy 6 acres. These 6 acres were known as the Atlanta Graveyard. Now, it's important for people watching this today to remember that in 1850, the property that they bought was actually outside of the city. As we know now, that property is in the middle of the city because the city has grown up around this graveyard. Now, if you remember back to our Ellis Hotel video, I talked about Atlanta and its role in the American Civil War. And if you can remember, and for people who are history buffs, you know that we had the Battle of Atlanta, we had Sherman coming through and burning down the city. There was a lot of death and destruction during the last part of the American Civil War. So by 1872, what was a 6-acre burial plot ended up becoming a 48-acre burial plot to house, to bury, to take care of all of the people who died during the Civil War. Now, with the expansion of this ground came a renaming. It went from the Atlanta Graveyard to Oakland Cemetery as we know it today, and they named it Oakland Cemetery after all the oak trees and the magnolia trees that were in the area. Now, something about Oakland Cemetery, it is also one of Atlanta's oldest public parks. So with Oakland Cemetery, what started to happen, especially in this Victorian era, was the descendants, the family members of the people who were buried at Oakland Cemetery, started going to the cemetery and planting flowers and plants, and they would pick flowers and plants that their loved ones loved in life. So the cemetery became this beautiful garden, gorgeous garden full of colors and just life. And I saw a quote and I kind of laughed because someone was quoted as saying that death doesn't have to be ugly. So as the citizens of Atlanta, the descendants of the people who had passed away and were buried in the Oakland Cemetery, started to make this cemetery this gorgeous place, the cemetery started to become a social hotspot. I remember when speed dating came out and I thought that was weird. Could you imagine potentially meeting your future spouse at a cemetery? Can't make this stuff up. Anyway, so in the late 1800s, people would take carriage rides out there. There were picnics out there. I mean, it was the who's who of the Atlanta high society. So again, as we moved into the 20th century, and we talked about this also in the Ellis Hotel video, we're looking at the World War I, we're looking at the Great Depression, we're looking at World War II. There was so much globally going on that a lot of the descendants of these dead people in the cemetery had to move on, and they left Atlanta. And so all these graves that had been managed and taken care of by family members all of a sudden ended up abandoned. And by the 1930s, Oakland Cemetery was a wasteland. And also the face of Atlanta, the personality of Atlanta at this point was starting to change and evolved. Again, as we spoke about in the beginning, when this land was bought, this was considered the country. But as industry started to go around Atlanta, this side of Atlanta wasn't at that point the real swanky side of the city. It was very industrial. It wasn't a place where you were going to go have a picnic and socialize with other Atlantans. But that all changed in 1976. Because in 1976, Oakland Cemetery was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. This, of course, brought a lot of attention back to the cemetery, and nonprofits and donations started to come in to rebuild the cemetery and bring it back to its peak, to make it look like it looked when all of the family members were planting and keeping up with the gardens. Now, by 1986, real change started because they started to offer tours. And even to this day, if you go on Oakland's website, you can see a list of all sorts of tours that are available at the Oakland Cemetery. These tours are important because, as we're going to get into later on in this story, we have a lot of really big names buried in the Oakland Cemetery. The cemetery itself tells a story and has such an incredible amount of history, not just for the city of Atlanta, but for their country as a whole. And by 2011, the Oakland Cemetery opened its doors for music festivals. That's right, you can go to Oakland Cemetery and watch bands play from time to time during the year. In fact, Josh McKay, our musician who wrote our opening song, has played at Oakland Cemetery many times. Josh McKay is better known for his place in the band Deer Hunter, but he's also played in other bands. Now let's talk about some of those residents. So, as I said, there are a lot of very famous people buried in Oakland Cemetery, a lot of politicians. Atlanta's first African-American mayor is buried in Oakland Cemetery. We also have golf legend Bobby Jones, who is buried there, as well as Margaret Mitchell. Margaret Mitchell wrote Gone with the Wind. I know I probably have a lot of Gone with the Wind fans out there, and we are going to get more into Margaret Mitchell and her life here in Atlanta later on in our series. Sadly, though, I haven't read any stories about Margaret Mitchell haunting the graveyard or Bobby Jones haunting the graveyard. Let me know if you have some stories about those two, but it seems that those two have passed on to the other side. So let's back up and get into some of the people who haven't fully gone over to the other side. So we need to go back again closer to the beginning of our story. As we said, during the American Civil War, Oakland Cemetery played a bit of a part in the Civil War. In 1864, before the burning of Atlanta, there was the Battle of Atlanta. And again, to back up, it wasn't yet Oakland Cemetery, it was still the Atlanta graveyard. And it was still only 6 acres. So there's a bell tower at the cemetery, and that served as the headquarters for the Confederate commander John B. Hood. Now, after this bloody battle, 7,000 soldiers were buried at the Oakland Cemetery. 3,000 of those soldiers still to this day remain unidentified. To this day at the Oakland Cemetery, there is a statue of a lion's guard, and that lion is guarding all the soldiers who were buried at the Oakland Cemetery from the Civil War. Now, some of our hauntings are from some of these soldiers, a bit like Gettysburg, right? So people who are in the park at night often say they see soldiers walking around in Confederate attire. They've also claimed to see Union soldiers hanging from trees. And probably one of the creepiest accounts that I read is that sometimes you will start to hear voices, like a roll call. You'll hear people yelling out their names, checking to make sure people were there. And what's even creepier is sometimes they'll call your name too. Now, one of the weirdest stories to come out of the hauntings at the Oakland Cemetery is the story of Jasper Newton Smith. Now, Jasper was an Atlanta businessman. He was quite successful, and he has a mausoleum at Oakland Cemetery. By his mausoleum is a statue of him just sitting down, hanging out. Well, multiple accounts, multiple people have claimed that while at night, they have seen his statue come to life. That Jasper Newton Smith stands up and walks around the cemetery. I mean, honest to God, if I saw that, I would probably crap my pants. When you get to Oakland Cemetery, they'll have some maps around that you can look to see where the different sections are. You can also download a map online if you just want to go walk the cemetery for yourself. They have the original 6 acres marked off. They also have a section for African Americans, for the Jewish immigrants. They also have Potter's Field, which was a place in the cemetery that was designed for very poor people who could not afford, whose families could not afford proper burial. Now, when you get to the Oakland Cemetery, there is a gift shop in the middle. It's in a beautiful building, and they have a lot of really cool little macabre knickknacks, and you can speak to the person in there about different tours or different things to do at the cemetery. You can also jump online and look at their tours as well. They have a garden tour. They might have some ghost tours. I know that they do really fun stuff at Halloween. They have actors come in and dress up like some of the famous residents that are inside of the graveyard, and they stand on their graves and they tell you the story of these people's lives, and you can kind of tour around. And also, of course, go and enjoy the music at the Oakland Cemetery. That's part of the reason why I think people still hang out there. It's always been a social spot ever since the beginning. This has been a place of community. So I think that's why a lot of our residents still kind of hang out, is they still want to be a part of that Atlanta community. So if you're coming into Atlanta from out of town and staying in a hotel or an Airbnb, most drivers, Uber or Lyft, will know exactly where the Oakland Cemetery is. It's a pretty big deal here in Atlanta, so that's no problem. If you have your own car, there is a parking lot right beside the cemetery where you can park. There's a lot of restaurants around the cemetery nowadays, a lot of privately owned restaurants from local Atlanta businesses, so it'd be awesome if you could go and support those restaurants as well. Now, of course, the tours, I think the tours are going to have an admissions price, but the cemetery itself does not have an admissions price. It's a public park. It's totally free. So if you want to make a donation, you can look on their website to see if you can make a donation, or perhaps go into the gift shop and see if they'll take donations if you feel so inclined to leave a donation. Please make sure to be respectful when you're in the cemetery. Even though this is such a fun place and a huge social gathering, it is still a cemetery. So please be respectful towards all the people that are buried there and all the people that work so hard to maintain this cemetery. As far as all the famous graves, you will see signs and markings directing you towards their place of rest. Okay, so I hope you guys like this video. If you have been to Oakland Cemetery and you have had an experience, a ghost experience, feel free to message me. I'm open to doing a second video on the Oakland Cemetery, but that's up to you to contact me. Again, thank you so much to Josh McKay for our music and to Todd Roderick for being our editor. Once again, hit that like button. The more likes we get on the videos, the more videos go out. And the more our videos go out, the more these local Atlanta businesses get noticed. And that's the whole point of this channel. This channel is here to spotlight how wonderful the city of Atlanta is, how weird, how quirky, how great it is. And so if we can get these videos out and get people going to these businesses, then this channel has done its job. Anyway, guys, be good. I'll see you soon. Bye.